you will see your money back on something like that. On the flip side, I get asked a lot whether or not should we update our kitchen or our bath.
Adam, what are some seller tips to get top dollar to get our houses ready to sell?
So obviously right now we're in such a seller's market. So some of the tips are a little bit unique for right now. First and foremost, obviously, you want to make sure, regardless of when you're selling, the house shows as nicely as possible. And by that, if you're living in most people, when they sell their homes, they're still living in them. And so there has to be a nice balance between having the house appear show ready, if you will, and living in it. So any kind of clutter that you might have, anything that you don't need, I would start to plan on getting rid of or storing. You want to make sure that you don't have any personal photos on walls. When a buyer comes through the house, you want to make sure that the house feels warm and lived in, but you don't want to necessarily show them that you're the ones living there with like personal photos and things. You definitely want to make sure that for the photos, any kind of video that's taken, and then any kind of open houses or private showings, the house shows as nicely as possible. So if you have kids, no one is expecting that your house is going to look like a museum, but maybe to try to keep all the toys and all the play area in one room, keep the kitchen as clean as possible with as few things on the counter as possible. Just those types of things. Curb appeal is also so critical. As I'm sure everyone knows, you only get one time to make that first impression. If there are things that need to be done or can be done on the house when the people come up and drive up to see it for the first time, I would certainly recommend doing that, whether it's putting some mulch in a flower bed or mowing the grass or trimming the shrubs. If the house is in rough shape, if it needs to be painted, that's obviously a bit more of an expense, but I do think that there is something to be said for painting a house as opposed to showing a house that looks like it's in beat up condition. You will see your money back on something like that. On the flip side, I get asked a lot whether or not should we update our kitchen or our baths. No, I don't recommend doing that. I think that is costly and time consuming, especially if you're living in the home. You don't want to have to deal with construction. And your taste is not necessarily what someone else's taste is. And so I would leave that to the next person. So more cosmetic things I think you want to focus on when you're listing your home, nothing major. Some people are choosing to do a home inspection now on their home, even though they currently own it, so they know what might come up during a buyer's home inspection. This way they can either take that report and disclose it, and so there's no surprises, or they can fix any of the issues that come up during the report, so the price that they're asking is warranted. So those are some things that, regardless of the time of year or the market you're in, might be helpful. Specifically for this market, which is a very competitive seller's market, you don't want to get carried away and list your home for an excessive amount of money. We're hearing these stories right now where homes are selling for tens or even in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking. And that's great, but you don't want to list your home for that number because you think you're going to get an offer. We don't know. I would very strongly urge you to continue to listen to your realtor and look at sales comps of the last 30 to 60 days top. What is sold in your neighborhood? What is this the similar location, similar size, condition? Use those comps. The goal is for me, whenever I list a home, I'm trying to get multiple offers for my clients, not one or none. I want to get multiple offers so they can choose and dictate what they want, the price and the terms, as opposed to have it dictated to them. So we're seeing some agents out there, what we call in the industry, buying a listing, where a house might be worth $800,000 and they're going in and they're saying it's worth $1 million when the comps clearly don't dictate that. And they're saying, don't worry about it, in this market you'll get $1 million. You may, but you may not. And so it's much safer to list the home in the price range where other homes have been selling, and hopefully you will get more. Hopefully you'll get multiple offers and the price will bid up. That's a much better scenario than to have your home on the market for 60, 90, 100, 120 days and get no offers, because then people, and then have to reduce your price, because then buyers are going to really try to take advantage. If I can offer one point of advice to a would-be seller in this market, it's to acknowledge that, hey, look, just because my neighbor's house sold for $100,000 over asking doesn't mean I should list my home for that plus $50,000 more dollars. Every home is different. Every situation is different. Talk to a couple of different realtors and have your realtor really explain to you how they came to the number that they came to, show them the comps, have them show you the comps, and talk it out with them and ask a lot of questions.
That was an interesting term, buying the listing. So someone coming to you promising like a little bit too much. Typically, if it's too good to be true, it typically is. But yeah.
And I'll tell you why agents, I don't mean to interrupt you, Brian, but I'll tell you why agents do that. Agents do that because in the back of their minds, they know, okay, I'm not going to be able to sell this house for this much. So I'll list it. I'll have a listing that I can say I listed a house. I might be able to get a buyer from this listing. A buyer might come to the open house that I can develop a relationship with, and maybe I can start working with that buyer. And eventually I'll reduce the price of this house and eventually be able to sell it for less. So some agents are okay with that. You might be okay with that, with working with an agent like that. I don't particularly enjoy having a listing for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. My clients get antsy. They think I'm doing something wrong. And I don't like having to go to multiple open houses week after week and showings. I like to be able to price my homes so that they'll get multiple offers and that they'll sell quickly. At the end of the day, a home is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. Yeah. As a realtor, all we can do is look at the data and give a pricing recommendation based on comps and say, here's where it should be priced. What it sells for, the market will dictate that.
No, absolutely. Also, I think that was an interesting aspect of the person who's like listing their house. Like, it is an emotional kind of a roller coaster, so they don't want to like necessarily be on the market for more time than they have to be, like, which is like anything, like you don't want to, kind of want to just the right amount of time, just enough to get top dollar, just so it doesn't drag on. Yeah, it's not fun.
Let me counterpoint that though. I would argue that a seller who is emotionally invested in their home will say, well, my home is worth $1 million and I'm not going to sell it to someone who doesn't value it at $1 million. And so they might be willing to wait until they get an offer that they like, even if that takes. So you have those two different types of sellers. You have the seller the realistic seller, and who will be willing to listen to the realtor. After all, you have to remember, this is what we do for a living. I've personally been doing this almost 20 years. I'd like to think I know what I'm doing and how to price homes. So when someone hires me to do a job, my hope is that they will trust that I have their best interests in mind and at heart, and do what I can to get them the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time for the best terms available. That is always if a client says, I hear what you're saying, but I want to list for $20,000 more, $40,000 or $50,000 more. I won't say necessarily no to that, but I will say, okay, Mr. Seller, I understand that you'd like to list a little bit higher. I'm willing to do that. But if the house hasn't sold in 2 weeks, we're going to agree to reduce the price to what I wanted to reduce it to, or what I wanted to list it at initially. That's a compromise that I am willing to take, because you got to remember, I spend money on marketing. It's my time. I'm doing open houses. I don't want to do that at a home that I know isn't going to sell. I don't want to spend my time listing a home and marketing a home and doing open houses at a home that's not going to sell. Now, I don't want to have the broker community come in and take me aside and say, what were you thinking when you priced this home? I had a situation just today where I did a market analysis on a home a few months ago, and it was a nice home, but it needed a lot of work, an older home. And I basically said, look, the home is valued at X. Well, the owner decided not to work with me. And I found out today that the home is coming on the market, and it's on the market. It's going to be on the market for, I think, $600,000 more than what I had recommended.
Wow.
$600,000. And I saw that and my mouth just fell agape. I could not believe that this agent is so irresponsible that they made that pricing. There is nothing, there are no sales comps to warrant that kind of price for this house. And at that price, this house will just sit there. The seller might be okay with that. I want to know, when I talk to a seller, what's your motivation? When do you need to be out of the house? What is your next? What are your goals? Where do you want to go next? Is that important to you?
Mhm.
And I take all that information. I say, okay, based on what you've told me, it sounds like you would ideally like to be out of the house in the next 2 to 3 months. The house is too big. They don't want to pay taxes. They want to right size. The house is too much for them. And so taking all that information into account, I put together a number that I think will get them what they want and help achieve their goal. In this particular case, this other agent came in and and what I alluded to earlier, in my opinion, bought the listing. Even in this crazy market that we're in, I would be stunned if it's going to sell for what this other agent recommended. $600,000. That's a house in so many towns. We'll see what happens, but that's something that sellers want to be mindful of.
Absolutely. Cool. Thanks for those seller tips. It's super good insight, like looking into like your experience, like with so long in the industry. So really appreciate that.
Anytime. Hey guys, if you're liking this content and are eager to hear more, I would encourage you to keep on watching. Click on the button to subscribe, and you will be the first to get new, fresh content as soon as I put it on the internet.